Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a seriously fascinating journey through time. We're looking at ancient manuscripts, these massive, incredibly fragile texts that literally hold the secrets of our past. But this isn't your standard history lesson. No, we're going to contrast the wild, almost unbelievable supernatural myths about how these books were supposedly created with the absolute cutting-edge science that historians and chemists are using to recover them right now. It's a story packed with extreme human dedication, bizarre legends, and tech that can literally see the invisible. So let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this. We're starting our journey way back in the 13th century with a manuscript known as the Codex Gigas. Now, legend has it that a monk in a Bohemian monastery broke his vows and was sentenced to a pretty gruesome punishment, being walled up alive. Yikes, right? To avoid this terrible fate, he promised his superiors he'd write a single, massive book containing literally all human knowledge, and he'd do the whole shebang in a single night. Well, around midnight, realizing this was totally impossible, he prayed. But he didn't pray to God. He prayed to the devil for help. The legend claims the devil actually finished the manuscript, and the monk, out of gratitude, painted a massive full-page portrait of Satan right there inside. And that's the bizarre, kind of spooky folklore behind the Codex Gigas, famously known as the Devil's Bible. But hold on, what does the actual math and science tell us? 20 years. Yep, 20 years. That is the staggering amount of time it would logically take one single scribe to complete this calligraphy if they were sitting down and writing nonstop, day and night, without ever taking a single break to eat, rest, or sleep. The Codex Gigas is the largest existing medieval illuminated manuscript in the world, and yet the handwriting is just remarkably uniform from the very first page all the way to the last. There are almost no signs of the scribe aging, no changing of habits, not even a shift in their mood. Honestly, it's pretty easy to see why medieval minds, completely baffled by this kind of consistency, just jumped straight to the supernatural to explain it. And, to add to its legendary status, the actual history of this book reads straight like an action movie. It was created sometime between 1204 and 1230 at the Podlajice Monastery. Then, by 1594, the famously eccentric Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II borrowed it for his occult collection and, well, unsurprisingly, never gave it back. Fast forward to 1648, the Swedish army plundered Prague during the 30 Years' War and took this massive tome as war booty. But guys, it gets even more chaotic. In 1697, the royal palace in Stockholm caught fire. To save this heavy, totally irreplaceable book, someone literally hurled it out of a high window. It reportedly landed right on a bystander below, injured them unfortunately, but it saved the manuscript from the flames. Finally, in 1878, it was actually dragged on a sleigh through the snow to its current home at the National Library of Sweden. What a journey, right? And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what happens when we separate myth from reality. The truth is honestly just as impressive. The myth claims supernatural intervention in a single night was the only way to explain the book's perfect consistency. But the reality? Decades of unimaginable disciplined work by just one scribe. Historians point out that the manuscript's uniform condition isn't demonic magic. It's explained by extreme dedication and the scribe using a single, incredibly consistent local source to make their ink, which was likely crushed insect galls and iron. And because it was made in the much colder climate of Northern Europe, this ink didn't fade to brown like Mediterranean texts usually do. So a uniform ink source plus a literal lifetime of discipline completely explains the unchanging state of these pages. No devil required. Moving right along into our next section, the Codex Versalensis, science over myth. So we're leaving the realm of folklore behind now to look at the Codex Versalensis. We're moving from supernatural legends straight into modern laboratories to solve some real historical puzzles. And this book, it is a true treasure. It's a 4th century Latin gospel, likely the very oldest surviving manuscript of the Latin Bible. But unlike that giant Devil's Bible, its state of preservation is just incredibly poor. I mean, its pages are decayed, the edges are completely eaten away, and the text itself has faded to utter invisibility in a lot of places. Why is it so damaged? Well, because for centuries, this specific book was used by people to swear sacred oaths. Think about it. Generations of hands physically touching, pressing, and wearing down that fragile parchment. So to decode a text that is essentially a ghost at this point, we can't rely on legends. Human ingenuity and modern science are our absolute best tools here. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is exactly how we solved that problem. Enter multispectral imaging. This is an absolutely brilliant technique that uses various wavelengths of light to capture and reveal hidden, faded, or damaged information on ancient texts. Back in 2014, this incredible initiative known as the Lazarus Project took a portable, highly advanced imaging system directly into the archives in virtually Italy. Their goal? To scan every single one of the manuscript's 634 fragile pages. Let's break down exactly how this complex process works, because it's pretty fascinating. Step 1. The team illuminated the pages using narrow-band LEDs. They basically bombarded the parchment with light ranging all the way from ultraviolet at 365 nanometers up to near-infrared at 940 nanometers. Then, step 2, they did something totally unique for the time. They transmitted light directly through the page from below, using green, red, and infrared bands to physically see inside the fibers of the parchment. And finally, step 3. By capturing these images at a massive 700 pixels per inch, the scientists ran heavy deterministic and statistical algorithms on the data. What this did was isolate the exact spectral fingerprint of that faded ink. It literally brought the invisible back to life, allowing scholars to read texts that hadn't been seen by human eyes in centuries. How cool is that? But just seeing the text is really only half the battle. We also need to know exactly what it's made of to fully understand its history. And that brings us to Raman spectroscopy and X-ray fluorescence, or XRF for short. Think of these simply as chemical fingerprinting methods. Back in 2007, a material analysis team led by Maurizio Acito used high-intensity lasers and X-rays to detect the specific molecular and metallic compounds hiding inside the manuscript. They were basically out there hunting for the chemical ghosts of ancient inks and pigments. Raman spectroscopy is absolutely perfect for finding organic, plant-based dyes, while XRF makes the heavy metals in the ink, like iron or copper, actually fluoresce so we can map them out. So the crucial point is, how is this chemical data actually applied to solve these historical mysteries? We'll look at the findings. The primary text was confirmed to be written in a standard iron gall ink, but the margins, and specifically the first and last pages, were written in iron gall that was mixed with carbon. They also found two distinctly different red pigments used for the illuminations, cinnabar and minium. By mapping exactly where these different chemical recipes sit on the parchment, historians can definitively separate the original 4th century scribe's handiwork from later additions, corrections, or, interpolations added by other monks centuries down the line. It's like a giant puzzle, and this tech allows us to peel back the layers of time with absolute scientific precision. These scientific methods do so much more than just solve old academic mysteries. They literally save human history from fading into total oblivion. We started this explainer looking at a monk supposedly making a pact with the devil to write a massive book in a single night. But the reality of human dedication over decades, combined with the awe-inspiring power of modern spectral imaging and chemical analysis, that is far more incredible than any myth. Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought to carry with you. If today's technology can perfectly reveal the invisible ink of a 4th century manuscript, what other lost secrets of our history are quietly sitting in dark archives right now, just waiting to be illuminated? Keep that in mind next time you look at a piece of history. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.